Do we have to talk about Alec Baldwin?
Welcome back to EnterTheRealWorld.com. This is There Will Be Movie. This is a podcast tackling some of our favourite movies that came out in a given decade. Volume 1, we are talking about the 2000s, 2009. If you would like the rules on how we came to this list and whatnot, go listen to episode 0, as I said, available on EnterTheRealWorld.com or Mike and Matt on SoundCloud. I am Matt Waters, and I'm joined on this endeavour, as always, by Ben Phillips. Ben, how are you? We're recording in the morning this time. It's much more agreeable for me because it's not a million degrees in my living room.
I know, it's nice.
It's nice. We might be sluggish. But
I just got back from a trip abroad yesterday, so...
Yes, you've been to my brother's neck of the woods in Amsterdam. How was that?
It was nice.
Yeah, well, let's keep it going. Let's keep the how are our personal lives going section.
had ate good food, saw Robin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, is that where you went?
That's where we went.
That's very cool. Right, well, that'll date the hell out of this episode. This is episode 5. We are doing the Royal Tenenbaums today.
An emergency episode.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well just say outright, this wasn't originally on the list, and then in the middle of recording some of the other episodes, we're like, I think Royal Tenenbaums should probably have been on the list after all.
Yeah, I think there was 3 episodes in a row we were just like, Royal Tenenbaums is really good, and then we were just like, why is it on the list?
I don't know. I guess we're calling this my pick because I really love Wes Anderson, and while I think I have a sort of stronger emotional or like a stronger liking of elements of The Life Aquatic versus this, I think this is a better overall movie, and it's probably the most movie-ass movie Wes Anderson has done, possibly. I don't know, but
I mean, this is kind of like a hybrid of his styles. Like, this is kind of the tail end of his like early movies where they function as like movies, and he had a style, but it wasn't like so omnipresent. And then after this movie, like Life Aquatic, Judge Ealing Limited, like they are dioramas and stuff like that.
Like that's the kind of stuff I think of. Like when I was watching this again, I was like, yeah, I mean, you've still got like elements of that absurdism, but there's no like, here's an obvious like paper mache model of the hotel at a distance, or like a wooden cardboard cutout of the ship, you know, that kind of stuff where it's just obviously fourth wall breaking. But yeah, it still has those weird offbeat Anderson tropes, but it's a far more serious movie, I would say, even if it has comedy in there. So yeah, written and directed by Wes Anderson, co-written by Owen Wilson, to which I'm like, sure thing, but there are
all 3 of the first 3 movies were co-written with Owen Wilson.
I think because the Wes Anderson-y-ness is so pervasive over the top of it that like you're dubious that Owen Wilson did anything, but like there are elements in here that are definitely from him.
I don't think he's ever actually written a script purely on his own.
I don't think so either, no.
I think like he's got like his little cabal of people that he likes to work with. Like I know Noah Baumbach is like someone he works with quite a lot. Jason Schwartzman as well.
Yeah.
You think he's got this like completely unique insular style, but he does collaborate well.
So, you know, Anderson also in this decade did, as I said, The Life Aquatic, Darjeeling Limited, and Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I think you made a slight push for.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is like, if I'm like talking about like my favourite animated movies of this decade, it's like Spirited Away, Pixar, and it's Fantastic Mr. Fox. Like I adore Fantastic Mr. Fox. Because I'm not a huge fan of Life Aquatic and Darjeeling Limited. It's like this massive return to form at the end of the decade for him, and then kind of like it kind of carries on. I don't like Isle of Dogs. I was so excited for Isle of Dogs.
I like parts of Isle of Dogs.
Yeah, I like the bits where it's not set in Japan. It's like, why is this movie set in Japan? Why is every Japanese character in this? Why is every character in this vaguely Japanese stereotype? Why is Greta Gerwig here voicing the one white character?
She's the whitest woman alive. I don't know.
I know, but it looks really good. And then obviously like Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest are...
Look forward to volume 2 of this podcast, is all I'll say on that.
Like, again, like, but this is kind of like, if we're not doing the 90s, we can't do Bottle Rocket and Rushmore. And basically, this decade is kind of between those 2, and we both had sentimental favourites in other movies. So this is the logical. This is
the compromise. Kind of. Released in March 2002 in the UK, December 2001 in the US. We've kind of already covered 2001 quite a bit in terms of the contextualising the year, but if you have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it opened number 4 at the UK box office in March. It made a little less than £1 million. I mean, what did it actually settle on worldwide at the end of the UK box office? So it made about $4 million at the UK box office, which is a big chunk of the $20 million it made worldwide. So the movie made, about 52 million domestic, ending up about 71 worldwide. But like, obviously, this is very much in the era of like foreign box office isn't a huge thing, especially for this tiny little movie. This is his highest grossing movie, I think, until Grand Budapest Hotel.
It was, yes. Budget of 21 million, box office 71.4 million. That's decent, I guess. But, especially because, Wes Anderson does not have a broad mainstream appeal. Like, it's, film crowds love it, but it's not something that people are going to rush out and see in mass.
That's what makes it insane when, you look at, Grand Budapest Hotel and it made $174 million.
Yeah.
It made $100 million more than Royal Tenenbaums. Is it just that there's a bunch of Wes Anderson fans worldwide that had previously been unrepresented until...
Potentially. I also think maybe that film, it's not more mainstream, because, Fantastic Mr. Fox should have probably been the one to crack the mainstream, but I don't know, I feel it's less... I don't know. We'll talk about that potentially when we do Volume 2. So it's 109 minutes long. Kind of flies by, in my opinion. There's not really a lot of big, sexy, dramatic development stuff because Wes Anderson just makes the movies he makes, and it's a product of his childhood and his influences, J.D. Salinger, Jean-Pierre Melville, Orson Welles. This is all very trodden ground. Allegedly, one of his friends growing up was in love with his sister, and in the first draft of the script, Margot was not adopted. So... make of that what you will. Eli is apparently partially based on Cormac McCarthy. That makes sense. When he's talking about his book that it was in an outdated vernacular or whatever, I think they were aiming shots at Cormac McCarthy there. And the whole BB in the hand thing, I was saying how aspects of this screenplay are directly from Owen Wilson. Owen and Luke's brother, Andrew Wilson, I believe his name is, that happened to him, and that is his hand that you see in that one shot where he prods at it. So Anderson wrote the character of Royal with Gene Hackman in mind. It took him a while to actually agree to play the part. He said some bullshit about how he didn't feel he had a lot in common with him or he didn't understand him, but then he also said that he had been distant with his family and he asked them if they would feel uncomfortable if he made it, and it's so do you have too much in common with Royal? Is that what you actually mean? And while he was dilly-dallying, they considered Michael Caine and Gene Wilder for the part, and then when they actually got Gene Hackman, it let them get Ben Stiller, Gwyneth Paltrow, etc, etc. Unfucking surprisingly, Gene Hackman is difficult to work with, and he and Anderson had a lot of on-set drama, and Bill Murray and Angelica Houston had to protect him, which I think is adorable. And as we mentioned in the Ocean's 11 podcast, this movie stole Danny Glover, Bill Murray, and the Wilsons from Ocean's 11, which would have been filming around the same time and released around the same time. So there you go. People would rather be in this silly little indie film than do big sexy crimes in Las Vegas, apparently.
Yeah. There's also an article at Vulture where it says apparently Ben Stiller was only available for about 3 weeks and Gwyneth Paltrow was only available for 8 days to shoot this movie, or 10 days or something.
Yeah, they had to heavily plan around those two schedules. Yeah.
Are those the two biggest stars in this at that point? The Wilsons aren't there yet. Owen Wilson is mostly doing his independent stuff. And whilst he's kind of tangentially related to, I guess, Shanghai Noon and Meet the Parents and Zoolander have all come out by this point for Owen Wilson.
But, I feel even at the heights of Owen Wilson's fame, he's not, a mega A-list star. It's kind of just, that guy who you know who he is, and, he's in a bunch of dumb comedies.
Yeah, Ben Stiller's kind of late 90s is kind of...
Huge.
3 years post There's Something About Mary at this point.
Yeah.
So obviously, he is big A-list. In the comedy world, he definitely is.
Yeah,
but he's also, picking up Owen Wilson taking places. So I do wonder whether or not Owen Wilson's the one who talked Ben into doing it.
From what I've read, that they got Gene Hackman, but I guess that didn't hurt as, a 1-2 punch that, hey, your friend is writing this. Is this the only Anderson film that Stiller and Paltrow have done?
I believe it is.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Stiller is in, Rushmore. It's been a long time since I've seen Rushmore, but we see this same pool of, 10 to 12 actors that are in every goddamn Wes Anderson movie, and it's, this is one of the more iconic ones, and yet I don't think he's brought these two back, and maybe it's because they're far busier than everyone else, but some of these people got quite busy at one point.
Wikipedia, very helpful, got a big board of actors who appear in multiple things.
There you go. Bill Murray, all of
them. Bill Murray's the big constant. This is the last one that Andrew Wilson and Luke Wilson appear in, but Owen Wilson kind of continues to pop up after this.
Yes.
Angelica Houston, this is her first one, and then Seymour Cassell is kind of in the middle of a run as well, but he's not like one of the big lists. So yeah, Bill Murray is kind of the only true constant from this movie that continues onwards, and Owen Wilson makes a spattered appearance, but Ben Stiller and Gwyneth Paltrow have not worked with him again.
Just, you know, the like costume designs, particularly for Margot and Richie, they're so iconic to Anderson's like oeuvre, and it's just somewhat surprising that they didn't get Gwyneth back at some point. I don't know.
Gwyneth kind of moved away from making these kind of movies, I feel. She'd done Shakespeare in Love at this point.
Yeah. What a time she had there.
I know, but like it's kind of like Royal Tenenbaums, and then like there's not much in this kind of vein afterwards. In fact, she kind of like Sky Captain: The World of Tomorrow.
Oof. I completely fucking forgot that film existed.
Yeah, and then there's not really much that's kind of like interesting until you get to Iron Man.
The most interesting film. The third one, particularly. Right, let's get into it. So this movie is ostensibly a book. A book is checked out called The Royal Tenenbaums, and it's split into chapters, and there's a prologue and an epilogue, and it's all very fucking cute. And that made splitting it up into 3 acts very easy, because it's kind of like the first 3 chapters are Act 1, and then 3 more are Act 2, and so on. So this sort of beginning portion of the movie, like the beginning of this movie is probably the most Wes Anderson-y, like 2 to 5 minutes there have ever been. It's just aggressively Wes Anderson right off the bat.
It's both aggressively Wes Anderson, and it's so quick. It's like the movie starts, and then there's immediately narration, and it's just like, here are 17 characters that you will get to know. Like, here's their life story up to the age of about mid-20s, and then we'll give you the full cast list, which includes none of the actors really who have appeared up to this point, apart from Gene Hackman and Angelica Houston.
Yeah, it's a somewhat odd practice to put the blah as blah on screen, like a TV show, almost. You don't really see that a lot in movies. You just see the names. But yeah, the little character intro is like, it's charming and strange. The weird details, like Margot's missing a finger, and Mordecai the Hawk, and all this sort of stuff. By the by, the reason that bird changes colours at the end, because it has more white feathers, and they muse that it's like how humans' hair goes like grey or white. They were filming in and around New Jersey and New York, and someone from New Jersey fucking stole the bird and demanded a ransom. New Jersey confirmed as trash forever. And you know, this continuing motif of when you see the adult versions of all these characters, everyone's getting ready in a mirror or in a bathroom of some sort. It's all very cute how it all like tonally.
I mean, like it's also handy because they literally lifted this and put it in the trailer. So like you watch the trailer and it's got all the shots of like all the stars in the movie that are going to be in there. But it's a very easy thing, which is like, look at all these big actors we've got, including like, I mean, this is Bill Murray's like first or second time doing this kind of role.
Yeah, I think he had some big movies that flopped, so he was like, I'm going to do little like low stakes comedies now.
Yeah, I mean, the Vulture interview, they were talking about how obviously like he had some flops. He didn't have like the strongest 90s, like after Groundhog Day. He's got a couple of sporting things, but this feels like such a logical Bill Murray role. Yeah. Looking back on it, but like I imagine back at the time, it's like what Bill Murray's star of Ghostbusters and all these like massive comedies and stuff like that. But obviously, like he's got these little roles going back. Like he has Ed Wood, he's got Space Jam.
Yeah, that's the 1-2 of Bill Murray.
The 1-2, Edward, Space Jam. They were year after year, but also that they're both these very memorable cameos.
Yeah.
Or like not huge roles that he's got in these movies, and that's kind of what he pivots into.
Yeah,
Lost in Translation is like the last Bill Murray movie that you will go see because it stars Bill Murray, and then everything after that is like his little appearances that he does in Wes Anderson movies, his little cameo.
He is the lead in Life Aquatic, but yeah, that is a sort of, it's another Wes Anderson movie, it's an ensemble cast, blah blah blah.
I mean, like Zombieland is another one that's kind of that kind of role that he's doing.
Yeah, this feels like what Bill Murray's been doing forever, and it's been 20 years now of this kind of thing with a very sporadic sort of larger role. But
I mean, it's got that fun thing where like what the rumor is that he's got like an answering machine message box that like you have to call him up and leave a message of what your pitch is, and if he likes it, he'll call you back.
That's fair. I think they should all be doing that. Isn't that just an agent?
No, but he runs it himself, and so like people will just call him again to do stuff, which is why you end up with things like him appearing in Parks and Recreation as the never before seen mayor.
Very good. So we meet this quirky family, like Royal is an asshole, basically, and he and Ethel are getting divorced, and their 3 Wunder kids are phenomenally successful child prodigies in various disciplines, and then as adults are just kind of stuck in that sort of post-success malaise. And
it reminds me of that tweet that's going around, which is like, if you were told you can read at a high school grade level whilst in whatever the best term is in America and stuff like that, you now have a crippling anxiety disorder.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
it's all that kind of thing. Like, these kids are like the smartest, most functional children in the world, and then as adults they're all riddled with self-doubt and mental health disorders.
Well, I mean, the thing is, to move on to chapter 2, like, to meet them all as adults and they're all dressing almost like the same as they were as fucking kids, except, Richie's got a beard that, he's stuck in his I was a successful tennis player stage, so I guess that beard is still there. But
Chaz has moved from suits into tracksuits.
Yes, a thing that Ben Stiller asked Wes Anderson about, and he came up with a bullshit excuse on the spot about how red is a good colour for, like, spotting people, and, like, how he's so safety conscious, and then he later admitted, yeah, I was making that up just to make you go away. Yeah, I've seen some critics claim that it's like he's running away from his trauma, but, like, that's a fucking reach. You got Chaz in the red tracksuits and his 2, like, identical sons who all follow the same routine, and Margot's wearing that big fucking coat and dressed like Nico, and Richie is Bjorn Borg, basically. the tragedy of Chaz not even remotely moving on from his wife's death, and, like, how he does this fire drill at 4 a.m. or something, and like, oh, we left the dog behind. He's like, doesn't matter. It's like, oh wow, this is incredibly unhealthy, you kids. Royal catches wind that, so Ethel's, I guess her colleague, Henry, played by
it's her accountant, and basically he's telling her that you should do something to distance yourself from your ex-husband, because he's gone bankrupt. Essentially, he's kicked out of his hotel.
Yeah, he's been living in a hotel for like 22 years, and he can now no longer afford it, and so, like, he proposes to her. He first phrased it as for tax purposes, which is the most romantic thing you can say. But yeah, when Royal, like, catches wind of this, he, like, rocks up at the house and, like, wants to spend time with them all, and he claims to be dying, and he wants to meet his grandchildren for the first time, and, like, it's all what it is. Royal's a massive asshole. I really like when he goes to meet the kids at the, like, that rooftop workout place at a Y or whatever, and he says, how often has he got you kids, working out? And they say 16 times a week. It's like, well, how the fuck does that maths work?
2 times a day, except on weekends when it's 3 times a day.
Okay then. Yeah, I guess that works. Anyway.
I like that, like, their working out though is like they're kind of sat on the
they're playing near yeah, exactly. They're not,
and the dog's just kind of there, and one of them has to, like, always keep an eye on the dog and make sure it's, like, tied up properly.
And like, Royal takes them to the graveyard, and, like, he constantly forgetting that Chaz had a wife that is dead, because he's just a massive asshole, and, like, picking up some of those flowers that they've put down for his mother or whatever and reusing it. They make it immediately obvious Royal is a complete asshole, and, like, they cast Gene Hackman, so what more do you need to do? The tennis commentary over Richie's, like, career by Wes Anderson and Andrew Wilson, who I assumed it was Owen, but then I looked it up and it is that third Wilson.
Oh, he does sound, I was going to say, it sounds like a Wilson brother.
They sound, like, Luke and Owen sound a little bit similar, but apparently Andrew sounds exactly like Owen, because I was convinced it was Owen Wilson. But yeah, it's Wes Anderson and Andrew. I fucking love the tennis commentary. Like, it's a very specific thing that I'm into, but this sort of, like, incredibly low energy, quiet commentary over a boring sport, I think is always very funny. I like tennis, but it's not the big sexy sport. Yeah, that's really fun. The character intros and all that work really well, but the sort of initial them all coming home bit or visiting home, or Royal first turning up, at this point it's a little bit like to me, and I think it really picks up in this second act where Richie tries to talk them all into letting Royal stay with them, and they say no, but then he, like, we find out he's faking, but he has, like, a medical condition, and, like, it forces their hand, and you get Royal bonding with his grandchildren. I think from here, this sort of middle stretch of the film is where I think it is actually really, really working, personally. And, it's not that the beginning is bad by any means. Like, I really like those intro scenes, like I said, but, like, your kind of first interactions with the adult versions of all of these characters, and maybe it's just overload of characters where you're like, wait, so this person is this person, and, you know, maybe it's that, but I feel it really picks up in this middle portion.
I think, like, when they're all together, it really starts cooking, but I do enjoy all the little kind of random bits that you kind of get, like Richie on the boat, and the first time you see him as an adult, he's, like, sending the message, but it's such, like, a Wes Anderson way of sending a message, and, like, he's sending a telegram, and he's like, read it back to me, and then he goes, like, new paragraph, and then, like, they cut away to some narration from Alec Baldwin, and then they cut back to him just going, like, yours, Richie, and it's like, why did this need to be this long circuitous thing? But no, I like all the stuff on the boat's fun. I think just the way they're describing, like, here's all the places he's been, and then the really long explanation of, like, how he got home and why he had to get off. And
yeah, that's what I'm saying, like, the beginning of the movie being, like, so aggressively Wes Anderson. All that kind of stuff, like the hyper-specific, needless details, the narration, and, it's so Wes Anderson, it's great. Bill Murray's reading of the line, well, I want to die, while taking a biscuit is Hall of Fame good. You know, you got the Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard song, which is really fun. The soundtrack to this in general is very, very good. It's not that he ever does bad music, but I feel like music is far more, like, prominent here than it is in the other stuff.
Yeah, like, he's got a score by Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo, which is, like, it's fun and light and really fits the movie, but then there's a lot of independent, like, not independent stuff, but, like, there's a lot of, like, stuff in the soundtrack that is not your obvious picks from these things.
But then there are also the big licensed songs as well. Like, there's some Rolling Stones stuff in here, and the music to me, like, really sticks out as part of the film in a way that it doesn't normally for his stuff. Like,
I really like that they keep using Christmas Time Is Here from from the Charlie Brown Christmas movie, just because it's like, it's just like, why is this playing right now? I understand, like, it's a song on its own, but it's so, that song is so obviously, like, linked to one piece of media that to keep hearing it kind of, like, every time I know.
It would be like repeatedly using Where Is My Mind in a TV show after Fight Club exists. Go to entertherealworld.com and listen to Countdown to Destruction if you want to get that reference. So, you know, you see Royal, like, just teaching them to be assholes, basically, the little kids, like, raising hell around the neighborhood, and, you know, he takes them to see, like, dogfighting, which he did with Richie when he was young and stuff like that. And I really like the scene where Chaz confronts Royal in the sort of the game cupboard with all the board games. I think it's so well shot, like the light turning on and off, and, like, you know, turning the light off and then the door opens and then closes and then he turns the light back on, and yeah, I just think that's really, really well done. And
it's such like a, I don't want to call it a proto-Wes Anderson shot, because it is like a fully formed Wes Anderson shot, but it is so completely his kind of shot.
Yeah.
In that, like, the frame is so overloaded with information, in that, like, all three walls that you can see have got all these different board games, have all got colours and designs that should be kind of, like, clashing against each other, but work to kind of create this picturesque thing, and, like, framing the two actors in the middle with the light bulb, and everything is just framed so perfectly, and so, I mean, and you get it so often, is his movies feel like dioramas, and this one kind of does have a little bit more of kind of like freedom of camera movement, but you've got things like the scene on the bridge later on, which is probably the clearest shot of, like, it's shot at a 90-degree angle, and it keeps kind of like flitting between those two angles essentially before coming together in the middle.
He's doing a lot of one-ers in this movie as well, like the camera is moving, but like there's no cut, as it were. I mean, it's probably not actually a one-er, but it sort of feels like one.
But it moves from, like, one perfectly constructed angle on set across, like, more of a perfectly constructed set, and then settles in, like, another perfectly constructed angle on a set.
I mean, that's Wes Anderson. It's like, it's a lot of, like, very colourful, out of time locations. They deliberately make it a little bit era non-specific. Like, we know at the end, based on the gravestone, that by the end of it it's 2001, but, like, they are deliberately taking some stuff that looks very 70s or 80s or even 60s at times. And, you know, I
mean,
like,
none of the computers in the movie are like 2001 era. They all look like they're kind of like 1980s, kind of like IBM Apple things.
Yeah, definitely. And, like, you know, that is how he likes to, like, most of his movies, I think he likes to divorce them from, like, real time, as it were. And, like, you know, sometimes you do know what the year is, but, like, he makes an effort to visually make it look like it could be from almost anywhere. And, like, you know, he also loves, like you were saying, like, every bookshelf, like, every book on there has been meticulously arranged in this game cupboard as well. It's like, I 100% know he has sat there and picked every fucking game and moved them around until they looked fucking perfect. But it's great. It gives us 20 amazing seconds. So good job.
Yeah. The thing that I find most interesting about like what Royal's doing here is that it's obvious the reason that he's in the house is to try and break up Angelica Houston and Danny Glover.
Yeah.
Is the whole reason he's in the house. But he is genuinely bonding with these two kids, even if he's kind of simultaneously falling back into his old trap of ignoring Chaz and Margot and kind of like focusing on Richie as like
Richie's
his
the favourite child, because he was the one that he took to see the dogfights, and like he calls him Baumer, which you get the sense that it's from his tennis career, you know, Tenenbaum, Baumer, and, like, you know, it's something that like his fans call him, and for his own dad to call him it as well, it's like, okay. And you know, you get this sense at times in the movie where like Royal acknowledges he's basically not part of this family, and it's like stuff like that. It's very telling. And
I mean, he hasn't spoken to Richie since the tennis match, because like one of the first things he says to him is like, I had a lot of money riding on that game.
I think he said I had a lot riding on it financially and emotionally or something like that.
Yeah, but like but financially is the thing that he says first.
Yeah.
And he's like, what's going on with you? Why are you not functioning? And I think that's when we cut to what actually happened during the game, and you get like the long explanation of like, oh look, his sister and her new husband are here.
Yes.
They got married yesterday, and it's like, oh.
Yeah. And you know, like he stole money from Chaz, and Chaz fucking sued his father. And you get the sense that, I don't know if he outright says it, but he kind of doesn't really fully consider Margot his daughter because she's adopted.
He always says whenever he's introducing her to someone, this is my adopted daughter Margot. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, what a way to not ingratiate a child.
Yeah, and I think as Richie is like a quieter person, I think Royal finds it easier to like dominate him, I guess, and that's why he's the favourite. But it's in this stretch, like chapter 5, where he successfully kind of meddles in Ethel and Henry's relationship, and then Henry deduces correctly that he's not really sick, and
you don't eat 3 cheeseburgers a day with French fries if you've got stomach cancer.
Indeed.
But then it does the thing this movie does so well, which is it takes this kind of like Wes Anderson-y dialogue, Wes Anderson-y looking thing, because like the things that characters say in this movie, no other character in any other movie could conceivably like say without feeling like this is really weird. But then you get the whole thing where like he accuses Royal of faking the stomach cancer, and they go like, well, how do you know what stomach cancer looks like? It's like, my wife died of it, and it's like, oh, okay.
And there's also this whole like racial thing that Royal has towards Henry, where he calls him fucking Coltrane and says he's gonna like talk jive to him. It's like, whoa, we are walking a line here, aren't we? I get it that it's all like being absorbed by the character and to make you not like him. But then Chaz won't call Henry by his first name, and I don't know if that was intended to also be like maybe a more class-based racism rather than just overt racism.
I took that as being like, I don't want you to remarry, like you've been the petulant child in this situation. I don't want to have to introduce more family into this thing, especially after my father figure is such a notorious fuck up. Like,
yeah. It's just unfortunate that you can draw that through line if you want to. Like, anyway, you said how he's come here to meddle with that, and then he finds himself genuinely bonding with the kids, and they do it in that line where he says, this last week has probably been the best of my life, and then the narration is like, as soon as it left his mouth, he realised it was true, implying he didn't mean it when he said it, but then he realised it was true. So yeah, you know, this is where we start getting into the potential tragedy of Royal. I don't think they ever fully ask you to like forgive him, because I wouldn't. But this is where they start being like, well, you know, here's the sad little man you should pity behind the, like...
I think they just about managed to walk that tightrope of, like, he is a fundamentally, like, bad person.
Yes.
But by the end, he is trying to better himself. But obviously, I mean, the end of the movie kind of, like, cuts short anything any, like, mending bridges he could do. But I think he genuinely seems to be becoming a better person by the end of the movie, just in the different ways he actually talks to his kids and stuff like that near the end.
But, I mean, at this point, you know, he admits that the timing is partially due to the fact he's just been kicked out of the hotel, and he talks about the effect that his brush with death has had on him, and he's like, but you're not dying. He's like, yeah, but I'm gonna live. And it's like, Jesus Christ. And I fucking love Pagoda stabbing him with a little penknife, you know?
You got me fired. It's that great little bit where he goes like, oh, I was stabbed once by an assassin or whatever, and this man carried me to safety. And he goes, oh, who stabbed you? And goes, oh, he did.
Yeah, a bad assassin if he carried him to his safety. So chapter 6 is where we get get the real heavy shit, because Riley and Richie, and I'm now thinking, did Grey Worm, Jacob Anderson, his stage name is Riley Ritchie. Did he name himself after this pairing of characters?
That would be weird if it was.
Yeah, it would. Anyway, but yeah, Riley and Richie. Well, Riley has hired a private investigator to look into Margot, essentially, and they find out here about her past, like she's been married before. And
he is generally named after the characters from Royal Tenenbaums.
Fucking boom. Podcast exclusive, except you Googled it and found it to be true, so it means
I did. It's on his Wikipedia page. As a musician, he uses the name alias Riley Ritchie, named after his favourite characters from the Royal Tenenbaums.
Excellent. There you go, we cracked the case. So yeah, Margot has globe-trotted and, like, you know, she had the affair with a woman in Paris, and she was touched up by Charlie Rose, and all these other things, and she's been married, and this causes Richie to transform from Jason Schwartzman into Luke Wilson. I'm sorry, but, like, you look at him with the beard and the hair and the sunglasses, and you know that, you know, Jason Schwartzman is in all these Wes Anderson movies. It's like, oh yeah, that's Jason Schwartzman. It's like, no, it's Luke Wilson, isn't it? So I find that really funny. But yeah, he shaves and cuts his hair and tries to kill himself, and everybody rushes to the hospital, and Riley leaves Margot, and then all this stuff. And, like, so this line, "I'm going to kill myself tomorrow," comes directly from a French film called The Fire Within, which was a Anderson influence. Elliott Smith is apparently not at all happy about his song being used in this suicide scene, but I was gonna say, like, I think it's beautiful. Like, it's sad, but it's a wonderful scene. Like, it's probably the most, if you take out the whole general Wes Anderson aesthetic of the intros being so incredibly Wes Anderson-y, this is probably the scene that, like, has the most impact to me.
I think this is the best use of Elliott Smith I've ever seen in anything, really. I mean, and obviously Elliott Smith he's using a lot of things, but he's very much that kind of, like...
Does he not know that he's, like, a sad person? Like...
I mean, he obviously wouldn't have known for the last 16 years or so.
No, but, you know, this
Yeah, the perception of all his music is that it's very sad.
Yeah, does he not know he's, like, a depressed person icon?
But no, this scene is wonderful. It's kind of like, all the build-up to it is Riley sat at home with Dudley, and then, like, he closes the door on them and then walks into the bathroom, and...
Yeah. It's just, yeah, exactly, that it's so, like, incidental, I guess. Like, he just sort of excuses himself to go try and commit suicide, like... And
then the kind of music cuts out, and Dudley walks in and kind of screams, and you get kind of, like...
It's brutal as well. Like, he really went for it. He didn't do the dramatic, you know, the poetic single slash or anything. And, like, when he shows Margot the scars later, it's like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, you really went for this.
But, yeah, I just love that it cuts out the silent scream, and then the music kicks back in as they're all rushing to hospital.
Yeah, and it's great stuff, like, with them all, like, once they found out about Royal, they've all gone their separate ways again, and then, like, this is what brings them back, and that's all great stuff. It's just, how do you feel about this in general? Because what is it really about Margot's past that would, like, make... I mean, they also find out at this point that, like, she's been banging Eli, I guess, is the big thing. But
I think for Riley, it's about she's been repeatedly cheating on him, because, like, you get all these ages, and you realise that they've been married for, 5 or 6 years at this point, so, like, she's been continuously cheating on him, and that's what hits him. I think what hits Richie is that
it's Eli, not him?
No, I think it's more the realisation that she's got this entire secret life. You kind of get it in that moment at the end where, like, Riley says, like, she smokes, is his first reaction. And it's this thing where it's like, oh, she smoked this all this time, she ran away from school, and she had all these affairs, she's been married, she's, like, just this list of all these things. And her brother has no idea that these things have happened, despite being nominally the person she's closest to in the world, even though they can't have a conversation because he's communicating to her technically through Eli.
Yes.
She's communicating to him through Eli.
That makes a lot more sense, because my fear was that this is partially one of those, oh, you're not a pure virgin or whatever, I will kill myself now.
I mean, I think that's definitely a reading you can make, is this kind of movie is kind of like slut-shaming Gwyneth Paltrow's character, which I think is inherently wrong, and I think, but the movie never really makes it text, like, but it's definitely a reading that you can infer from it. I think it is more about, because, like, when Riley sits down next to Margot in the hotel room, it isn't, oh, you're such a slut, it's, you made a cuckold of me, which I think is the important distinction to make there. And then his revenge off of that is, I'm going to reveal to your family that you smoke. I'm going to ask for a cigarette. And I think that's why I can kind of explain it away. Like, it's not that she's been sexually active, it's that she has betrayed the trust or not entrusted Richie.
And, like, you know, in movies, you can make readings that the person did not intend, and it's a problem when you can too conveniently marry together several of these, like, observations into a constant through line. Like, that's when it's a problem. But when it's something like this, and, like, I think your explanation works, works. It's just unfortunate that you can make that reading. And then, like, you know, to go from the suicide attempt to the Richie, like, checks himself out of hospital and he goes back to the house and he finds Margot in the tent, and, like, their little tearful conversation and, like, talking about why he did it, him confessing he's in love with her and them kissing, and then, like, her saying, I think we're just going to have to secretly be in love with each other and leave it at that, Richie. Like, I think this may be the most serious 10 minutes that Wes Anderson has ever filmed, potentially. Like, there's probably, like, one joke somewhere in this stretch, but, like, these two isolated scenes, and, like, this one is much longer than the suicide attempt. It's just, like, here's 3 to 5 straight minutes of, like, this is just human drama, and, like, this is really sad, like, watching these two people just be incredibly sad together.
I text you. It's really good. I think both Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow are really good here, and it's a shame that kind of neither of them get to do this kind of thing more often.
Yeah. Why isn't Luke Wilson a bigger star?
I generally don't know. I mean, he was in Enlightened, which was really good a few years ago, but, like, he just hasn't...
Because I think he's a good actor, and he's also funny. Like, you know, he's done his Old Schools and his, you know, other type of stuff.
Well, apparently, he's going to be in The Goldfinch later on this year, which could be good.
Right.
He's going to be in Zombieland Double Tap.
Yay!
But yeah, like, he just hasn't really done that much. Like, he's really good on I Like, though, and he was also the main role in Roadies, but Roadies is not great.
That's what I heard. And so moving into the sort of the final act of the movie, sort of chapters 7 onwards. So, you know, post this suicide attempt and post this conversation with Margot, Richie seeks out Royal and tells him, oh, I'm in love with Margot, and, like, Royal, while he's initially very royal about it, and, like, oh, you know, she's an attractive woman, and it's like, that's your adopted daughter. Like, he does ultimately come down on the side of, hey, you should go for it, and, like, try and be happy. And
I think it's this kind of stuff, because obviously, like, Royal, he's eaten humble pie, he's gone to work at the hotel.
Yeah, he's a bellhop or an elevator operator in this hotel he stayed in for 20
But I
minutes.
love that, like, he keeps running off.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, colour
Like-
for us," and he's like, oh, "Sure." Like, why? Why are you coloring?
Like this guy who he keeps on employing to do random things. Like, he employed this Dusty from the hotel to be his, like, fake doctor when he was at the house.
Yeah.
In this wonderful little thing, but he keeps on dragging Pagoda along with him as well. Like, there's no reason to take both of them to go visit his son in the hospital or whatever. But, like, he's just like, come on, let's go take 2 people to Skype off work rather than just one person.
Totally. I also love that he's that lazy. He picks a fucking hospital that's closed and a doctor that doesn't exist. It's like, you couldn't have just vaguely... Anyway. And then, you know, they go to Eli, and, like, Eli is the character that, to me, kind of sticks out compared to everyone else, and I feel like we're missing a couple of scenes to make Eli work better, because I know he's, like, the point is that he's sort of part of the family, but he's not, so we don't follow him as much. But to me, it's, like, the first indicator... When they go to him and, like, you know, you need... They're basically just talking about, you know, you need help and stuff. It's like, with what? And this is, to me, the first time you find out that there's anything really going on.
I mean, you get the scene where they watch the interview on TV, and he kind of, like, spaces out for a second.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And that's the only time you get mentioned that he's on drugs. I mean, you also get the scene when he drives Margot, and they stop outside this, like, random house.
Sure.
And Margot's just like, why are we here? They drop it in, but there's not enough to kind of, like... He doesn't have enough scenes with the whole family doing things to kind of, like, reinforce what his association with family is, because you get the one scene where he goes, like, he was around the house all the time, and at the birthday party, like, Royal comes up to him and says, like, why are you wearing pyjamas? And he goes, oh, he's allowed to sleep around. But because there's not enough of that, like, every scene he has is kind of isolated with Margot or whatever. And
I just feel like he takes on such a huge role in this last little stretch, and he's kind of just been an accessory until now. I don't know. I don't think it breaks anything. It's just he's the one character I feel doesn't quite fit in, and maybe that's on purpose.
I mean, yeah, I can see it as being like he always wanted to be a Tenenbaum, and so in this movie called The Royal Tenenbaums, he's kind of this destructive force, kind of like working on the edges, not quite able to fit in all the rest of it. I think it's made weirder by the fact that it's Owen Wilson playing him.
Yeah, I guess.
Because when he co-writes the movie and his brother's playing one of the main ensemble, it does become a little bit
kind of the
distracting.
lead, I would say. Richie is mostly the lead, I don't know.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit distracting.
It does.
And I think Eli's involved in some of the most Wes Anderson scenes. Like, he's in the scene when they're on the bridge, and I think that's a really wonderful kind of like Wes Anderson move where the camera shifts between the two perspectives. There's the scene in the house with Richie and Eli where, like, Eli comes out and goes, like, I want to help you get off drugs. And the camera, like they're talking in, like, the door frame, and then the camera pans across, and there's 2 chairs that kind of staggered so they can sit in a very Wes Anderson way and carry on having a conversation. It's that weird thing where, like, there's moments in this where the conflicts seem to starts to resolve really easily, where like Richie goes in and says like, "You're addicted to drugs. I'd like to stop you from doing drugs anymore." And then Eli goes like, "Thank you. No one's spoken to me like this before." And like, oh, this was a very easy resolution to.
Oh yeah, and then we see what actually happens.
Yeah, then he runs off, and you've got Pagoda out the window, just kind of go like, "He is running."
Yes. Oh, Royal also gives Ethel divorce papers and gives his blessing, but we also at this point, like when Richie first goes to Royal, he admits that he's trying to pay his dues and he's hoping someone will notice. And it's like, so are you doing performative niceness now? Essentially, I mean, I guess it's better than no niceness whatsoever. Or he was faking it before, and now he's trying to actually be nice, but it is with that hope that someone will be like, "Ah, well done, you're being nice." And it's like he's now gotten into that like performative woke type thing. I mean, if the guy is fundamentally an asshole, like it makes sense that he would do that, but it also then calls into question the sincerity of some of his other stuff that he does after that. I don't know.
I do buy that everything he does after this is relatively sincere.
But I mean, giving the blessing to Ethel after he's just admitted he's paying dues, hoping someone will notice. It's like, well, do you actually mean that, or are you trying to do that thing where it's like, I'm going to take this breakup so well that she's going to like see that I'm mature and take me back, which people do all the time.
Yeah, I mean, possibly it could be that.
Anyway, yeah. So chapter 8, on the day of Ethel and Henry's wedding, Eli crashes a car into the front of the house, kills the fucking dog, man. Like, what's the need?
Matt, we've done an entire show where the first episode the lead character murders a bunch of dogs.
And what did I say? What's the fucking need? Countdown to Destruction on IntoTheRealWorld.com. Royal saves Ari and Uzi, Chaz's kids, and Chaz attacks Eli, and then they both end up admitting that they need some help. And, this scene is so fast. Like the priest falling down the stairs and just this wacky, like, chase. And Chaz, like, he's, like, painted his face up for some reason as well.
Well, he's on peyote, so it's like the implication is he's gone somewhere to, like, questionably...
Yeah, and he's got his, like, cowboy motif, and at the end his sponsor is, like, a Native American. It's like, what's happening here? Again, I think, like I was saying, like, because Eli is playing such an instrumental part of this, like, he becomes not the villain. Well, I guess Royal was the villain up until now, but this is the big confrontational scene.
How would you feel if they swapped Eli with Chaz in terms of who played them?
I don't know. I can't see Owen Wilson playing the aspect where Chaz was like a phenomenally successful like stockbroker businessman type dude, and he has his 2 kids militantly doing stuff. That's very Ben Stiller to me. But then in terms of what we actually see them doing for the majority of the movie, yeah, I could see that switch. But
it's just like the thing that always brings it home for me is like there's the scene where Richie and Eli are like having a conversation face to face, and you just sat there going like, you sound identical, and your faces are identical.
Yeah,
this is very distracting that you're not literal brothers in this movie.
yeah, true. It's just Ben Stiller, I feel, made a career on that kind of, well, I don't want to say the neurotic Jew type character, but like that whole like shouty, hyper organized.
I mean, I think there's pros and cons to both of them. I think I like the idea of Owen and Luke Wilson playing brothers,
yes,
and
absolutely.
Gwyneth being the more obviously adopted sibling.
Yeah,
is quite nice. But then also I do like the idea of like Margot is having an affair with someone who does look very much like Richie, which you don't get if it's Chaz.
That's true. Very good analysis, Benjamin. Richie is the one that like obviously needs the help, and like Eli has the drug problem, and he's just been confronted about it, and this is how he responded. But Chaz throughout has also been obviously very, and like Royal outright says, like, I think you've had a nervous breakdown or whatever. And so for them to both come to this moment of I think we need help. So yeah, I mean it works. It's just these two are sort of treated as less important to the narrative than Richie and Margot are, and Royal is and stuff. So
I think it's interesting that Margot doesn't have that kind of same breakthrough. Like she's almost figured out her shit beforehand.
Yeah,
in like that weird way is like when
I think it's everything coming to the fore with her. Like she's been dealing. It's just now everyone knows, and it's not a big secret thing. I think it allows her to just openly be, I guess.
Yeah, it's just you get that scene where like Etheline tells Margot that like Chaz is coming to live with her, and then Margot's kind of offended that like, why does he get to come live with you?
Yeah, how come he gets to? Yeah.
And then she's just like, because he's depressed, and he goes like, well, I'm depressed too.
Yeah,
she's pre-diagnosed herself. She knows exactly what's wrong, and she's
women are more emotionally like aware than
It's just that thing where, like, everyone else kind of gets a moment where it all comes out. Like, Chaz has this moment of rage, Richie has the suicide attempt, Eli has the obvious drug problem, Royal Tenenbaum kind of, like, figures out his shit. Like, Ethel and, like, Margot isn't well adjusted, but she also doesn't get a moment apart from, like, if you count them kissing in the tent as being, like, a moment where arguably hits rock bottom, but then at the end, there's the implication that they are in a relationship.
Yeah, they're, like, standing up, spooning at the grave and stuff.
As I texted you last night, Wes Anderson very clearly coming down the side of nature versus nurture. Like, they're not siblings, therefore they can be in love, realistically, despite being raised together for 12 years.
Exactly. Like, you were saying, like, if they're, like, adopted siblings who, like, find each other in adult life or whatever, and then it's fine, but, like, his love for her is ostensibly based on their childhood together, and, like, they ran away together to live in that museum and all this, and, like, it's implied that they haven't seen much of each other, any of these people, as adults. So it's like, so you love her based on the time where you were raised as brother and sister, and, like, even if you say that Royal is an absentee father, like, they were all still raised together. And when learning that originally Margot wasn't even adopted, this all comes a little bit more troubling, and, like, that this was the get out clause for her, and it's like, well, now I can do my incest story.
Would that make you feel like the general absurdity of it? Would that make it sit better with you, though? Like, is there something about them being adopted that kind of feels like you're just trying to explain this away as being, like, not a taboo? Whereas if they had been real siblings, like, you kind of get the feel
where Benjamin, real?
I'm being very mean. If they had been biological,
joking. I do this shit all the time. And
if they had been biological siblings, would the general absurdity of them falling in love be more acceptable because it's such a heightened, stylized kind of thing in a Wes Anderson movie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying if he'd done an actual full-on biological incest story, I would have been like, I can't get on board with this. It's all done in a very, like, charming, whimsical way. It's not like a hypersexualized thing or anything like that. It is just very interesting that it kind of comes across as, like, I want to do it like that, but, like, I have to make them adopted so that people will be okay with it. And it's like, well, I don't think everyone is okay with it still.
Does this movie have, like, the most object, like, sexualization of any Wes Anderson movie?
I mean, he loves, like, random nudity, but it's normally, like, a piece of art or a poster or, like, an old lady or something.
Because there's the naked poster of the woman in Margot's flat. But
then you also have her in Paris, like, fondling a woman's breast and, like...
Yeah, because Wes Anderson is quite twee and very much, like, and exactly. A lot of it's never quite sexualized, whereas this is like, this is both
to define her
and...
by her sexual history, and, like, I don't even know if he was going for this, but, like, the concept of, the white woman going to this, like, I don't know whether to Jamaica or whatever, I don't know, it's all a bit like, what are we doing? What are we saying about Margot here, and what are you saying about people in general? I think her character is the trickiest in terms of, like, problematic stuff of all of them. In this epilogue, we end up with Royal having a heart attack and dying. By this time, he and Chaz are on good terms, and Chaz is, like, with him when he dies, and it's all sad, but, like, we also get the whole, this is what happened to them all, and ostensibly they kind of all ended up in a good place. Royal helps bury the dog that got killed, and, like, he gives the kids a Dalmatian, because there's this weird
called spark plug.
Yes. Because there's the weird little thing with, like, as a child, Chaz, like, invented Dalmatian mice or something, or they drew on real mice with Sharpies. Animal cruelty. Ethel and Henry do get married. Margot writes a new play about her life, and I like that it's to mixed reviews. It's not like she's back as a massive playwright.
To mixed reviews, it closes after 2 weeks. It's like...
Yeah. Riley writes his book about Dudley, and Eli goes to rehab, and Richie is teaching tennis to kids, and Royal leaves is it the encyclopedias?
He leaves the Encyclopedia Britannicas.
Oh, of course.
To the kids.
To the kids. And they're in black tracksuits at the funeral, which is a great little beat.
I love the kind of, like, the tracking shot of the fire ambulance. Fire ambulance?
I mean, kinda.
Ooh, that's not again. I love the tracking shot of the fire people.
That was good. Fire engine? Is that what you're going for? Fire truck?
I love the tracking shot of, like, the firefighters at the very end, where you kind of, like, catch up with all where the family are, and you get Royal kind of, like, haggling with the firefighters to get the Dalmatian.
Yeah, I like that he buys the Dalmatian off the fire truck.
You're going up and down, and, like, there's enough time in between him haggling and then him walking into the scene with, like, Chaz's kids and whatnot with the Dalmatian, and the kids kind of go, like, Buckley's still under the car, and it's like, we'll get him out eventually.
Yeah.
Like, that poor Beagle had to put up with so much shit in this movie.
Yeah. It's that thing of, like, Royal, like, even at his most trying to be good, he is still on some level just a giant asshole who doesn't think about other people. But yeah, and you end with is it an epitaph when it's on a gravestone?
It's a wonderful epitaph.
Yeah, saying
he mentions it early on that he wants it like written word for word,
and he wants her to make sure that it's. I think he asked her to like proofread it and make sure it goes exactly as and he died like heroically on a battleship or whatever. And it's like, wait, what? Yeah, so it ends in this sort of nice place, I guess. And it's like, what I would say about the film in general now we've finished is, to me, easily the bleakest Wes Anderson film. Like, it does have all these like absurdisms and like there are comedy beats and like obviously silly things, but this is fundamentally a tale about a very broken, depressed family. There's the suicide attempt, there's the the death of the dog, and like multiple people saying I have to get help and stuff. And like even with this sort of happy-ish ending, like Eli going to rehab doesn't mean Eli's getting clean, and like Margot's play isn't actually successful, although she ends up with Richie, so if we're saying that counts as a happy end. I don't know, it's just, it doesn't end in a fully happy place. And like, there are several Wes Anderson films where there is this sort of underlying malaise to the characters. In Grand Budapest Hotel, how you see Ralph Fiennes' character, when you see him in his room by himself, it's this tiny little squalid place and he's like all alone, and like there's that, but like it's not presented front and center like that. It's kind of an undertone to it all, whereas this is very like, here are some very broken people who are going to spend most of the movie not able to confront the fact that they are like in need of help. And it's, I don't know, it's a very different kind of thing from him here, I think.
I mean, how much would you say this is kind of related to Owen Wilson? It's kind of half the script, because you obviously like this kind of stuff, it isn't very bleak going forward, but obviously Owen Wilson, like in terms of the other Wes Anderson movies, but obviously we know that Owen Wilson has dealt with depression. He
allegedly tried to kill himself in 2007, I think.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where,
I mean, he's like writing his own mental well-being into a character played by his brother, and then his brother is shooting a fucking scene of potentially his feelings that he would later try and act upon. It's a good point. Maybe it is the Owen Wilson factor that he was bringing in this heavy theme of depression and stuff.
I mean, because I think the movie does a very good job with it. Like, because even in this kind of like heightened thing, and it still kind of nails the emotional pathos and like beats for this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it got nominated for a Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars. I think it's a damn shame that it didn't win. Instead, we gave it to fucking Julian Fellows for Gosford Park. But also, confusingly, this is the year that it was up against Memento. So, like, you have these two fantastic screenplays by such up-and-coming directors, both of whom have gone to strength to strength afterwards, and we give it to the guy who did Downton Abbey.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen Rushmore. I've actually never seen Bottle Rocket, but like, even though it is still silly, it's the most serious of his movies. Maybe Rushmore is also like this. I really don't remember it that well.
I think it's very easy to think of these first three as being a little mini trilogy onto their own. Like, this is the start of Wes Anderson as director. I think Life Aquatic is kind of
very absurd direction.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there an animated segment in Life Aquatic?
Yep.
Yeah, it's very much kind of like, that is kind of where Wes Anderson kind of erred more into parody.
Yeah. We'll talk more about Wes Anderson next volume. I love that, so all these title cards that we get for the chapters, because it is being presented as a book that is being read by Alec Baldwin, I think narration is good. We're not going to talk about Alec Baldwin though. This sort of tiled magazine and book covers is a recurring theme. Like, whenever anyone mentions a book they've written or a magazine they've been in, we get like tiled versions of the cover. It's very cool.
But I kept getting stressed whenever they'd have like a working book of something that was mentioned in it, and I was just like, God, I can't imagine how much that cost to like be designed and printed in such a way to like have it work. Like you get Richie repeatedly reading Margot's plays throughout the thing, and I'm just like, oh God, that must have. I can't imagine how many meetings there were about like this. A front cover needs to look perfect.
Yes, but yeah, I really like how on those little title cards, when it says chapter 1, chapter 2, you can see what happens in the first thing in the scene. Like it will say like he pulled up to the house and this, and then you see him pulling it. It's just very clever.
It's like, what if we wrote the screenplay as a novel?
Exactly, and I'm shocked they haven't, quite frankly. The other thing that really sticks out about this, like part of its legacy, I guess because it's been parodied a lot, the sort of yellowness, the sepia tone that's over the whole thing, I think that's a sort of defining visual trait to this movie, because it is still very colourful. It's just there's a lot of yellows and stuff like that.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. There's that famous internet video of like, what if Wes Anderson directed the X-Men.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's like that kind of like has completely nailed down, and it's mostly this movie it's taking stuff from. Like I feel like there's not much Life Aquatic or Darjeeling Limited in it. It's very much like even down to like the relationship between the Cyclops and Jean in that trailer. It's the Richie Margot relationship. Yeah, because this is the calling card movie. Like this is the one that people think of when they think of Wes Anderson. Because
which is strange to me because it's like not as Wes Anderson. I mean, as I said, the first like 10 minutes are probably the most Wes Anderson-y 10 minutes. But the overall movie to me isn't as like I think of Life Aquatic and onwards, that kind of aesthetic when I think of Wes Anderson. So it is interesting that you're right, this is the one that people go to when they're either going to parody it or when they're going to talk about it. I think Grand Budapest has kind of taken the role now. I think Grand Budapest was kind of like, it's the most well seen. But I do think that like Royal Tenenbaums, because it's been out for so long, it's kind of ingrained itself in kind of film history as being the movie. Yeah, well, there you go then. And we have talked about it for an hour almost. There are elements of Life Aquatic that I identify with far more strongly when I think of why I love Wes Anderson, but like this is, to me, for this decade anyway, and like, you know, maybe I'll rewatch Fantastic Mr. Fox at some point and be like, oh no, you're right, we should have done this. But like, this is like his best executed movie.
A lot of Fantastic Mr. Fox is my affection for Roald Dahl in general.
Sure.
And I just think like it completely nails that kind of like
Dahlism.
It's like a perfect melding of Dahlism and Wes Anderson in those two things, and is I think what I really like about it. Like these little moments I always think back on, like when they eat food and they eat food like animals eat food. Like they're all prim and proper in suits and stuff like that, and then food will be delivered and it's just like
Wow, some Foley work there by Ben.
What we haven't discussed Dudley.
Oh, okay, sure. Do you want to discuss Dudley from Freaks and Geeks?
Dudley is like one of my favourite like random bits in this movie where it's like I don't even think like the diagnosis that Raleigh gives for him like fully like satiates my need to find out what's wrong with this person.
Yeah, he's like, now make it exactly like mine, and it looks absolutely nothing like it. Yeah,
it's that little moment where it's just like he's got amnesia, he's got dyslexia, and he's colourblind, and it's like none of those three things would mean he couldn't create like.
Because he says where you're going to put the red piece, and there is a red piece. It's like, and like, you know, he's got acute hearing, and he's like, I'm not colourblind. He's like, I'm afraid you are. Like
that's one of my favourite little moments in the movie. Is like he's whispering into the recording, and you can just see Dudley in the other room. And like when the taxis that are all gypsy cabs, which is so random. Yeah. And he just goes like, there's a dent there, and there's a dent there, and there's a dent there.
Like, are they getting at Dudley as autistic? Like, is that?
I don't know. It's so confusing, but it's just this wonderful little through line that gets payoff at the end when they're just like he's just sat there with like his hand on his knee, and everyone's just fascinated by this man.
Yeah, the front cover of the book being like Dudley, like making this like, you know, blinking almost while the photo is being taken. Just the tragedy of Dudley, the sort of unsung hero of the film.
I mean, he had a good year. Like he's in Freaks and Geeks at the same time, more or less. So
recommended to him by Judd Apatow. There you go. So next week we're going to be doing Catch Me If You Can, which we've actually already recorded just to break the fourth wall, everyone.
Speaking of shifty fathers who maybe have problems with the IRS.
Fucking boom. That's how you podcast. Go to entertherealworld.com, subscribe, listen, follow, comment, do all that good stuff, and we will see you next time for Catch Me If You Can. We're back to some like kind of light-hearted sexy crimes. Bye everyone.